1, 2, 3, 4.
Screen time, screen time, screen time, screen time.
It's my screen time too.
Screen time, screen time.
Hello, and welcome to It's My Screen Time Too, the podcast where we review the programming the other critics ignore. Stuff made for kids. Find out what to watch for family movie night, what to avoid altogether, and what you'll want to watch alone voluntarily. I'm Katie.
And I'm Deborah.
And I have two kids, ages 8 and 5.
And I have 3 kids, and they are 14, 11, and 11.
Welcome to a Screen Time in the News episode for the week of May 29th, 2024. Deborah, a couple episodes ago, you talked about searching for a Screen Time in the News article to confirm your biases against Chromebooks in the classroom. And we had a great conversation about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm here to tell you that I have done the exact same thing this week. I'm on record in this space as a general hater of video games. I just do not understand them, nor do I enjoy them on a personal level.
Mm-hmm.
And I am extremely uncomfortable with my children's love for them. I'm aware that they are a totally ubiquitous component of modern childhood, and I try to be confident that it's mostly fine. I really do. But it's virtually impossible for me to fully stifle my mom guilt about them. So, to assuage that mom guilt, I don't know, we read a Bloomberg Businessweek article from May 13th about parents filing lawsuits against video game companies like Microsoft, Nintendo, Sony, Roblox, and Epic Games for their games' addictive properties, which parents allege have caused all sorts of psychiatric disorders in their kids like ADHD and depression. The article specifically quotes mothers of a 14-year-old and a 9-year-old, but it mentions hundreds of other parents filing suit and that attorneys are attempting to have more than a dozen video game addiction lawsuits grouped together before a single federal judge at a hearing on May 30th in Salt Lake City, which is this week, so it felt very timely to address here.
Right.
So what do you think of these suits, with the obvious disclaimer that neither of us are lawyers and we really don't know anything at all?
We read one article.
Yep. Experts.
But we read more than the headline. So we're qualified to have this conversation.
Yeah.
I don't know the merits. I feel like it just can be summed up with it's complicated. I'm sure there's some things that video game developers could improve upon, and these companies are a little bit preying on children, but why were these kids allowed to play video games for so many hours in the day? And maybe not why, but maybe what were the circumstances? Was it because the parents had to work and the kids were home during pandemic distance learning? Was it because the government failed them? Was it because they didn't have affordable childcare? I think there's just a lot at play here that it's probably not just the video game developers' fault.
Yeah, and that's unfortunately how it works with a lawsuit, right? You have to prove it was all the video game developers' fault, and I just don't see how such a thing is possible in a case like this because there are so many variables.
So I have one child with diagnosed ADHD, and one thing I've learned from parenting him and reading about that condition is that an ADHD brain seeks out stimulation, and video games do a really good job of providing that kind of stimulation. So for kids with ADHD, that can almost be a break that they crave. And I think it's impossible to say that a video game caused ADHD. I don't think it works that way. Maybe it makes the symptoms worse, and maybe a kid with ADHD is more likely to develop a video game addiction. But I don't think that there's a connection there that they're making in this lawsuit. I don't think that video games cause psychiatric disorders. Exacerbate maybe, but not cause.
And even if somehow they do, it just doesn't feel like, from reading this article, that incontrovertible evidence is there. At least not yet.
Right.
And I am all for alleviating mom guilt. I will seek out any opportunity to just free myself of this crushing weight of underperformance. But even I find it difficult to just blithely shift all blame onto these corporate entities.
Right.
To the extent that we should even be talking about blame, because this is obviously a multifaceted issue.
Right. Yeah, it's tough.
So along those lines, the author compares these suits to two others. Suits against social media companies for knowingly harming kids' mental health, and suits against big tobacco. These two examples seem like apples and oranges because the repercussions for the social media companies have been negligible to non-existent, while those for big tobacco were much more severe. Do either of these seem like apt comparisons to you as a layperson reading about this?
No, not really.
Yeah, I thought the issue with the social media company lawsuits and the thing that made it successful to the extent that it was that they had this smoking gun from an informant inside the company that said, look, we did internal studies about the harm that our product was doing to teens.
Mm-hmm.
And we explicitly chose to ignore the results of those studies. And look, we explicitly chose to do it and wrote in emails, hey, by the way, we're explicitly choosing to ignore this data.
Right.
And that was what helped that lawsuit succeed. And there doesn't seem to be any smoking gun in the case of these video game companies.
Right. That's a really good point.
And in the case of big tobacco, at the point that these lawsuits succeeded, there was incontrovertible proof that tobacco was directly causing these physical harms. And again, we just don't have that with video games, if it even exists. Did it feel at all to you like a charming throwback to the panic of our teen years, which was all about the content of video games? And the worry was that the violent content in video games was going to cause violent behavior in children?
Yeah. Was it Grand Theft Auto? Was that the big one?
It was a big one. And then also just all the first person shooters.
Mm-hmm. Mortal Kombat. That was another one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There was a definite moral panic around those.
Yeah. I mean, the focus now is much less on content and more on time spent. But even as a parent who is going through this panic in the moment, it still smacks of parents reaching to blame the factor in their kids' lives that they don't understand because it's different from what they had growing up.
Right.
And it's hard to get away from that.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think the parents stand a chance here?
Look, I feel for the parents involved because I know it's tough. I know if I let my kids have a yes day, they would just eat sugary cereal and play video games all day because those things make you feel good in the short term. I get it. And it's hard as a parent to set limits, and it's hard to, especially if you don't have the financial or family resources to come up with alternatives for activities and healthy foods to eat. It can be, I'm sure, super difficult. But I feel about free speech for algorithms I feel about human rights for fetuses or free speech for unlimited corporate spending on political campaigns. The government lets so many harmful profiteering companies do so many horrible things. I just don't think that the parents are going to win.
Yeah, it would be weird for this to be the thing that is overcome in the courts. You're not wrong.
Yeah.
So with the stipulation that we don't think the parents can possibly win because they don't have a clear-cut case, what would be the ideal outcome from cases like these? Yes, the plaintiffs would obviously get paid, but what larger changes to the market? If we could just imagine something, would it be age restrictions? Would it be labeling? Would some games have to shut down entirely? I don't know. Did you have a pie in the sky dream about what could happen to video games?
I don't know, because it seems like the thing that they want to punish is a variable reward system, right? Because that's what makes video games so quote unquote addictive. And if we're going to regulate variable reward systems, then we need to get rid of state-run lotteries first.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, speaking of variable reward systems that prey on vulnerable people.
Yeah. See, I was very focused on the fact that this is a lawsuit about the effects on teens and children. And I think there's a pretty clear way that they could stipulate that any sort of changes would need to be made for things that are marketed or intended for kids in this age range, which is why I felt there was like a whole aside at the end of the article about how they're trying to launch similar lawsuits against Match.com for addictive dating apps. And I just thought that was so funny. And again, like totally not applicable in this space because it's not about preying on the youth. It is about decisions made by adults about how they want to spend their time. And yes, it's icky to make people want to spend this much time on an app, but it did not feel like a similar circumstance at all.
Yeah, I guess you are right to focus on the fact that it's for kids, but I don't know. Like we have ratings systems and we have warning labels.
And what does that accomplish? Obviously.
And they've done nothing, I don't think.
Right. I would just love if we could use something like this to reopen the conversation about some games being, and I'm putting this in scare quotes, educational, like Minecraft and Roblox, because I feel like these two giant game systems have gotten a huge pass because we, for whatever reason, decided that they can be considered to be somehow good for our kids. And I would just love it if we could re-examine whether or not that's actually the case.
You know, have you ever read the book or heard of it? It's a novel called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabriel Zevin.
I have heard of it.
It's really good. And I used to be more with you on the I hate video games. I don't get it. They're bad, like net bad. But then I read that book and I was like, okay, there is like some artistic, imaginative value here.
Of course. And that is part of what worries me about Roblox. Like, we have all these wonderfully imaginative video game designers that are designing beautiful things. I mean, even just looking back on my childhood, I loved Myst. Even though I'm not a video game person, I love puzzles, and even I could recognize a beautiful thing when I see it. You know what is not beautiful? Roblox. Maybe it is part and parcel to the way that I react to all user-generated content with YouTube and everything that we talk about here on the podcast, about how it's so much easier for us to appreciate professionally made products that are made with care, and I'm reusing the word, but with some sense of professionalism. And I feel like by training our children to only want, you know, video game playthroughs on YouTube with someone's head in the bottom corner, or only want these like herky-jerky Roblox games, that we're maybe doing them a disservice by teaching them that they can't expect better.
Yeah.
Anyway, this has been Soapbox Time with Katie. I hope you've enjoyed it.
I just don't think that the market is going to correct itself. And I don't think that these lawsuits are going to provide a good solution.
So what's the answer, Deborah? Do you think Congress is going to do something?
No. I mean, I don't want to be super bleak about it, but I think that the way out of here is like a whole societal reimagining, like having like fully funding schools and robust after school programs. Like if we require dual incomes to support families and school hours don't match up with parents' working hours, then kids have to go somewhere. And we don't have like safe streets or places for them to get around, like ways for them to get around other than in cars. So I think it really needs to, I don't know, maybe on a local government level, that's where it gets solved, because that's where school funding comes from.
You know, I love
but
that.
the likelihood of that happening everywhere we live. I live in Minnesota. It's more likely here than it is where you live. So I don't know. It's like really frustrating. And I feel like we're not going to solve anything here on the podcast, but we can certainly try to add to the discourse around it.
You're right. And I think the truism that true change happens on the local level definitely applies here. And it is something that we can both think on, all of us can think on, how we can best direct our efforts to being the change we want to see in the video game landscape.
Yeah.
All right, now are we ready for general catch up?
Yeah. So what are your kids watching and what are you watching with them?
It's been a pretty screen-free week here because I did my first full grounding ever. And it felt weird. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Like a you're grounded.
Yeah.
Grounding?
Yeah.
When you first said grounding, I was thinking like a yoga, like
Yeah. Like a retreat. I was just gone.
all 10 toes on the floor.
Exactly. So we have not been consuming much screen-related content together, but I did want to tell a funny anecdote that is tangentially screen-related.
Okay.
We've been listening to a lot of Phineas and Ferb soundtracks in the car on our drives because we do a lot of drives here. And you know how when you have a toddler and they really like coloring books and your urge is to be like, oh, well, clearly they're going to appreciate a more complicated art set and they have a bright future as an artiste. You know how you have that urge as a parent when you see any sort of glimmer of enjoyment of a thing that you're going to foster it and it's going to be their thing.
Right.
So we've been listening to all of this Phineas and Ferb in the car. Phineas and Ferb songs are brilliant, and the vast majority of them are obvious tributes to either specific songs or genres that the adult listening will hear and recognize, which makes them fun and listenable in a pleasant way for grown-ups too. So around the millionth time we heard the specific song, I said to myself, I don't even have to search for it. I know the exact Jackson 5 track they're referencing. I'm just going to pull it up and see what my 8-year-old says. And maybe like it can be a bridge to a wider appreciation. So I pull it up and I'm talking about it. And I'm like, do you hear how this is pretty much exactly the same as the song we've been listening to? And he said, yeah, I really hear it. You're right. It's almost identical. Do we have to listen to the rest of it?
Oh.
And I thought, oh no, buddy, this is a me thing. This is not a your thing. Of course we don't have to listen to the rest of it.
That's cute.
So it's a very sweet reminder to slow my roll.
But good for you for putting in all that effort.
All right. What are you watching with your kids, or what are your kids watching right now?
We are evaluating all of our streamers, thinking about a different strategy, because right now we like subscribe to too many things. So we were like talking about what we want to watch versus what we're actually watching. Honestly, other than if I haven't been watching anything with my kids lately, but kind of planning out the streamer strategy for the summer, I guess.
What's on the bubble?
I don't know. I need to do a little more research. I'll update you next time.
Okay, I can't wait.
So what are you loving or looking forward to in your kid-free screen time?
Well, we're a little late to this party, being that it's the end of May, but we're finally circling around to the new season of Bridgerton, which I actually kind of like that we've taken the time, because it did come out in the middle of May, but the second half isn't coming out till the middle of June. So I like that we've put it off so that I then don't have to wait as long to get the final 4 episodes, because it's an 8-episode season. They've split it in half. I don't know. Are you much of a Bridgerton watcher?
I haven't watched it at all.
Oh my gosh. I love it. It's just so silly and fun.
I'll have to check it out. Speaking of being late to the party, so the Minnesota Timberwolves have had a good playoff season. So Jeremy's been off watching a lot of games, and I've taken that opportunity to watch Girls 5 Eva on Netflix, which is really fun. I really am enjoying it. I think I insulted our friend chat when I suggested that one of our friends' kids was a New York lonely boy.
No, I think you're safe.
But that child, I could totally picture them requesting Earl Grey ice cream.
I love that show. I'm so glad you're watching it.
Thank you for listening to this Screen Time in the News episode. Next week, we'll be back with a review of Garfield. If you enjoyed our show today, please recommend the show to one friend you think would enjoy it too. We love growing our community of parents for sanity and screen time. Never want to miss our up-to-the-minute thoughts about screen time? Well, you can head over to our website at myscreentime2.com and subscribe to our updates. Tune in next time for more real talk about the movies and TV we watch with our kids because we have to, and sometimes because we like to. Bye.
Screen time, screen time, screen time.